Do you want to upgrade your office PC for cheap? Do you want to be able to play games on your small form factor computer? Then this is the card for you. On May 17, 2017, Nvidia released a low power, low profile graphics card that was supposed to be used as only a display adapter, the Nvidia GT 1030. Nowadays, you can pick up one of these GT 1030s for as low as $34, which is the exact price that I paid for my Nvidia GT 1030. This exact model comes with 2GB of GDDR5 memory running at a real base clock of 1290 MHz and a real boost clock of 1544 MHz. This card doesn't require any additional power connectors and only uses about 30 watts. As this card is a little bit older, it does come with some dust buildup, but actually not that much, so let's quickly spray it off so we can actually use it and test it inside a small form factor PC. Even though the card is low profile, it does occupy 2 slots, as you can see from the height of the cooler. This cooler does mean that it's going to be cooled sufficiently, of course, but make sure that you have sufficient space available in the small form factor PC that you're going to use it in. While cleaning, I actually noticed there was a little piece of plastic still in the end of the cooler. Should I remove this or should it stay there? It seemed like a mistake and that it should have been removed, right? What do you think? Why don't you leave it in the comments? And maybe in the meantime, subscribe to the channel, would help me out a lot. This EVGA GT 1030 will be placed in my Dell Optiplex 720 small form factor PC. A small office PC that is actually still quite popular. This exact model comes with an Intel Core i5-4590 and 16GB of DDR3 memory. As the card doesn't require any additional power connectors, it should slot right into this mighty old office PC and give us some amazing gaming experience, I would say, right? Well, I was wrong. As you can see, this office PC has a full-size PCIe slot right at the bottom. The card would fit in here if it wasn't for the USB connector that's in the way. Also, placing it in there would be a bad idea with the fan completely blocked off by the PSU. Happily, above the full-size slot is still a PCIe slot with 4 PCIe lanes. This slot can't unlock the full power of other cards in there, however the GT 1030 only needs 4 PCIe lanes to work at its full performance, so this shouldn't be a problem and should function just fine. As you can see, we now actually have enough space available for the fan to also collect some fresh air, so this should function just fine, I would say. Okay, we can place a little bracket back, which also allows it to look a little bit neater in the back, and then we should be good, ready to test some games. So, can this PC indeed game, is the question. Starting off with Apex Legends, running at full HD resolution of 1920x1080 on medium settings, we were able to achieve an average of 64 frames per second with 40 frames per second for the 1% lows. Moving on to Call of Duty Warzone 2, a more demanding game. This was able to run a full HD resolution again on basic settings, an average of 33 frames per second with 15 frames per second for the 1% lows. Playable, but not really amazing, of course. Then we move on to Counterstrike 2, which we ran on full HD resolution 1920x1080 on medium settings. This is where the little card really blew my mind and we were able to get a whopping 144 frames per second average and 88 frames per second for the 1% lows. After this amazing performance, I wanted to try a more demanding game, meaning that I tried Cyberpunk 2077. This, well, I don't really have any other words for it, ran bad. With low settings on an HD resolution, I was able to get an average frames per second of 25 with 1% lows of only 10 frames per second. Silly me expecting a better performance here. After that disappointing experience, I thought Fortnite was a good next game to test. This I ran on high settings with full HD resolution again. With these settings I was able to achieve an average of 45 frames per second with 1% lows of 23 frames per second. Very playable indeed. Moving on to GTA 5, again on high settings and a full HD resolution, I was able to achieve an average frames per second of 52 with 35 frames per second for the 1% lows. This actually ran really good on these settings and it was very playable. Then I moved on to Halo Infinite. This I ran with a full HD resolution and low settings and gave me an average of 40 frames per second with 1% lows of 30 frames per second. Dropping down the resolution made it a lot more playable, clearly showing that the GT 1030 to be the bottleneck here. Then it was the turn for Overwatch 2. This game performed really great on a full HD resolution, running an average of 88 frames per second with 66 frames per second for the 1% lows. And then the last game that I have tested on this setup was Rocket League. This ran amazing on a full HD resolution and a setting set to quality. Here I was able to get a whopping 163 frames per second with 87 frames per second for the 1% lows. This card honestly has surprised me a lot, and if you can get one for cheap, I really recommend it. However, if you want even better performance for a low profile card and you're willing to pay a little bit more, I do recommend going for the GTX 1650, which also comes in a low form factor. Well, low profile form factor of course. I hope you all enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. See y'all later, bye bye!